Farrah Fawcett and Ryan O'Neal's love endured for 30 years, but their romance had a tragic ending. To lots of people, Farrah Fawcett of Charlie's Angels was a perfect woman. Her red swimsuit pinup is reportedly the highest-selling poster of all time, after all, having found a place on millions of bedroom walls, and while those who bought it may have fantasized about her someday becoming their girlfriend, Fawcett only had eyes for one man. Said man is actor Ryan O'Neal. He made a name for himself in the 1960s and 70s, performing on the popular soap opera Peyton Place, and even earning an Oscar nod for his role in the 1970s Love Story. However, O'Neal's own romantic life was seemingly a complicated one, and in later years he admitted to the media that he had some big regrets concerning his relationship with Fawcett. Despite all the problems and issues in Fawcett and O'Neal's union, not least the fact that it started with infidelity, the lovers always seemed to go back to each other. The stars even had a child together, but they never got married, and while they might have exchanged vows eventually, fate intervened in a terrible way. When O'Neal and Fawcett first encountered each other, the latter was actually already married. She was the wife of Lee Majors, aka the $6 Million Man. They were estranged though, having begun a trial separation in 1979. But it still shocked Majors tremendously when she began dating a friend of his. Majors and O'Neal had been pals for a while, in fact, and so when Majors once asked the other man if he could check in on Fawcett and make sure she was okay, he didn't expect that his buddy would make a play for her. They got all serious and I couldn't believe it, Majors told People in 1980. Perhaps needless to say, this spelled the end of the Majors-O'Neal friendship. I called him and asked him to lay off a bit, Majors told People. I can't, he told me. I really love her. So I said, okay buddy, if that's what you feel. I haven't spoken to him since. And so, until the divorce came in 1982, Fawcett remained Majors' wife only by name. Then, in 1985, after several years together, Fawcett and O'Neal had a child together. Unfortunately, their son, Redmond James Fawcett O'Neal, would go on to lead a troubled life. His rap sheet includes robbery, drug possession, and even attempted murder, in fact. And in 2019, it was reported that he had been diagnosed with schizophrenia. Fawcett, meanwhile, seemingly endured struggles of her own. Both before and after the birth of Redmond, the actress found herself thrust into the public eye, and she apparently didn't like it at all. She even devised subtle ways to hide from the spotlight. I said, "Why do you wear your hair like that?" O'Neal told Vanity Fair in 2009. Fawcett said, "I can't see to the right or left, and that way I don't have to see people looking at me." Such an admission may have come as a surprise to the many people who idolized Fawcett's hair. For a while after all, the Farrah Fawcett flip, which she sported to great effect on Charlie's Angels, was all the rage, and some fashionistas even think that the style is making a comeback. In fact, it's been suggested that Fawcett was a victim of her own good looks and sex appeal. She was beautiful and likable, which is a hard combination to find. I've never seen anyone have an impact like Farrah did, said Leonard Goldberg, who was a co-producer on Charlie's Angels television show, to Vanity Fair in 2009. Fawcett herself, meanwhile, always seemed ambivalent about Charlie's Angels and her star-making role in it. When the show was number 3, I thought it was our acting, the actress told TV Guide magazine in 1977. When we got number 1, I decided it could only be because none of us wears a bra. It perhaps comes as little surprise then that Fawcett quit Charlie's Angels that same year. The star never gave a concrete reason, but some think that it may have been down to a desire to be taken more seriously as an actress. As she branched out, however, the critics didn't go easy on her, and Fawcett's next film, Somebody Killed Her Husband, was even dubbed by some reviewers as Somebody Killed Her Career. During the same period, O'Neal's professional life was seemingly also taking a hit. He had starred in Stanley Kubrick's Barry Lyndon in 1975, and its mixed reception affected his reputation for years afterwards. Meanwhile, O'Neal's estranged son Griffin has maintained that it was also at this point that his father began cheating on Fawcett. During an in-depth interview with Larry King in 2009, Griffin described the relationship between O'Neal and Fawcett. It was bombastic at times. There were great times. There were very hard times. By the time Redmond was 5, they lived in separate rooms in a very large house, he said. And when King asked Griffin if there had been any infidelity in Fawcett and O'Neal's relationship, Griffin described his father as faithless. Plus, he went on to detail an incident that he claimed Fawcett herself had told him about. She walked in on him and he was with some other woman. I know this for a fact, Griffin said. In fact, O'Neal himself admitted to the event when speaking to Vanity Fair in 2009. He implied, too, that there had been plenty of difficulties between himself and Fawcett. She was very high maintenance. She took a long time getting ready to go anywhere, and that started to drive me nuts, he said. And Fawcett getting older apparently didn't help matters either. I believe Farrah was going through some kind of change, O'Neal told Vanity Fair. He added, "I didn't have a change of life. I was always a jerk. But they're hard work, these divas. I was sick of it, and I was underappreciated. I just don't think she liked me very much. So I excused myself, and I was lucky enough to meet this young girl." Yes, O'Neal confessed that he had embarked on an affair with an actress called Leslie Stephenson, and Fawcett had found out when she had walked in on them. It was terrible, O'Neal told Vanity Fair. Leslie dived under the covers. I thought Farrah was going to attack her, but she said, "What's your name?" Leslie said, "Leslie." And Farrah walked out. Perhaps unsurprisingly, said incident spelled the temporary end of the Fawcett-O'Neal romance. Then in 1997, Fawcett began a relationship with director James Orr, and it made news for bad reasons. That's because in 1998, after Fawcett had left Orr, he was convicted of assaulting her and was handed a 3-year probationary sentence. In fact, it took a serious illness to bring Fawcett and O'Neal back together. In 2001, the actor was given a diagnosis of leukemia, and this apparently triggered a reconciliation between the pair. "She came right to my side, which I loved her for," O'Neal told Barbara Walters in 2009. We gradually started to rebuild our relationship." O'Neal recounted this part of his life to Vanity Fair in 2009. "Leslie was gone and Farrah came to me. We started over again, and this time we built a relationship in a way that had a foundation in trust," he explained. "Farrah had her home here, and I had my home at the beach, and she would only come on the weekends. The romance was back on then, but there were more troubles ahead. Firstly, Fawcett's sister Diane died of lung cancer in 2001. She'll have a bout of chemotherapy, and then she'll go out with a friend and have a drink. She's so strong. She's amazing," Fawcett told the Daily Telegraph a few months before Diane died. Fawcett knew plenty about cancer, mind you, having been the chairwoman for the American Cancer Society's Women Against Cancer campaign in 1980. Plus, a few years after Diane's death, Fawcett's mother Pauline also passed away. She was 91 years old and survived by her husband and 2 grandchildren, as well as Fawcett herself. Pauline had appeared in her daughter's reality show Chasing Farrah, and footage of it is shown at her funeral. And unfortunately, Fawcett's son Redmond also encountered hardships. In 2008, when Redmond was 23, both he and O'Neal were arrested for the alleged possession of methamphetamine. At the time, Redmond was already serving a 3-year probation stint related to a different drug possession case. Thankfully, O'Neal and Fawcett stuck together throughout all of this. But things took a turn in 2007. After fighting cancer the previous year, Fawcett thought that she may have beaten it. Unfortunately, though, the actress was wrong. The illness came back, and this time it had spread to her liver, and it soon became devastatingly obvious that she wasn't going to survive the battle. Fawcett tried many different procedures to stop her disease, including chemotherapy, chemoembolization, laser ablation, and alternative treatments. Unfortunately, however, none of them properly took hold. And in May 2019, it was reported by news outlets that Fawcett was spending her last days with O'Neal at her home. Remarkably, Fawcett openly shared her battle with the disease with the world. With the help of her friend Alana Stewart, she ensured that almost every detail of the ordeal was recorded for a documentary, and even some of the most saddening and most personal moments of Fawcett's fight, such as the actress finally having to shave off her famous hair, were immortalized on film. Before Fawcett became too ill to communicate, she recorded a segment for the beginning of the documentary, in which she states her intentions. Why is there not more research into certain types of cancer? Why doesn't our health system embrace alternative treatments that have proved successful in other countries? I have got cancer, but I'm alive. What are you fighting for? She asked. The in-depth look into Fawcett's fight was all the more notable considering the stigmatized type of cancer she had. Hers was anal cancer, which is understandably difficult to talk about with some people. And sufferers of this kind of the illness appreciated that a famous and beautiful woman was bringing their difficult experiences to light. Just before Fawcett died, O'Neill spoke to People magazine about how devastated he was. "It's a love story. I just don't know how to play this one. I won't know this world without her," he said. Cancer is an insidious enemy. Meanwhile, he explained that Fawcett's treatment had pretty much ended in May. For a while, however, O'Neill had been optimistic that the treatments would work. There were times when there seemed to be positive results. Farrah was even playing tennis, he said to People. But at about the halfway point in our trips, the news started to get darker and darker and darker. The hope started to fade. Meanwhile, O'Neill also shared that Fawcett hadn't been too concerned about losing her iconic locks in the end. "I've cut the hair at home," he told the magazine. "She didn't care. I rub her head. It's kind of fun, actually, this gray, tiny little head. How she carried all that hair, I'll never know. She doesn't have vanity about it." In fact, throughout O'Neill's entire People interview, he didn't shy away from his sadness. "I can't hear a song, I can't pass places that we were together without being stabbed in the heart," he said. "A week ago, Farrah said to me, 'Am I going to make it?' I said, 'Yes, you'll make it, and if you don't, I'll go with you.'" Fawcett passed away on June 25, 2009, after her life support was removed. And the actress's final utterance, according to the people who were with her when she died, was the name of her son. She was saying his name, Redmond. A friend of the star's called Mila Murphy told People magazine in 2019. That was the last thing she said. According to O'Neill, he had wanted to finally marry his lifelong partner when she was on her deathbed, but tragically it didn't work out that way. "I've asked her to marry me again, and she's agreed. The priest at St. John's Hospital arrives to marry us, but administers the last rites instead," he wrote in his 2012 autobiography, Both of Us, My Life with Farrah. And this heartbreaking story has been backed up by Stewart, too. "I think they would have married if she had made it." And the heartbreaking story was backed up by Stewart, too. "I think they would have married if she'd made it, because he asked her to marry him in the hospital and she said yes," she told People magazine in 2019. But she took a turn for the worse. This was just a few weeks before the end, so perhaps it wasn't realistic. Since 2019 marked the 10-year anniversary of Fawcett's death, lots of people shared memories of the late actress. Murphy, for instance, told People about O'Neill remaining by Fawcett's bedside and speaking to her in her final hours, and the star had been so close to death at this point she hadn't even been able to drink unaided. Murphy's was a sad story, but certainly a touching one. The night before Fawcett died, O'Neill was talking and talking, leading up to the story of when he first met Farrah, Murphy said. It was his way of telling her how much he loved her. She looked over at me and rolled her eyes, and then she smiled. But perhaps the most moving memory of Fawcett's final days belonged to O'Neill. She was in and out of consciousness, he told People after her death in 2009. "I talked to her all through the night. I told her how very much I loved her. She's in a better place now." 10 years later, O'Neill naturally hasn't forgotten the person that he loved, and it's said that he hasn't enjoyed another significant romance since either. In June 2019, the actor spoke to People magazine once more and summed up his and Fawcett's beautiful love story. "There was never a day I didn't love her." Share and subscribe 24H News Channel. Thank you for watching video.